right, so we're going to go ahead and start off with an easy one. We're going to start off with number 1. Number 1, we have a b squared plus 2b minus 8, and that is equal to 0. Now today I'm not going to ask you for anything about your discriminant. I'm not going to ask you what type of solutions or how many. Today it's nothing but quadratic formula. All right, so starting with number 1. It's already equal to 0, so I'm going to go ahead and write down the formula, and that is x equals negative b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2 times a. That's the formula that we're using today. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out each of those letters and we're going to replace it with a number. And those numbers are right in the equation. Remember, this is your A, this is your B, and that right there is going to be your C. So they're already in alphabetical order for you. So I'm going to go ahead and start by replacing that B with a 2. Don't forget the negative sign is part of the formula. Plus and minus the square root. There's another B, so let me replace that B with a 2. Minus 4, it's part of the formula. A, we're going to replace that with a 1. And the C, we're going to replace that with a negative 8. And then right below that, we got 2 times A. A, we're using a 1. So there it is with everything plugged in. Now that I've got everything plugged into the formula, next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our calculator, and we're going to do that piece underneath the square root. That's called the discriminant. So with your calculator, you're going to enter 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 8. And let's see what we get. 36. Somebody check that one. Is that right? 36? All right, so we get a 36 for our discriminant. That's the number underneath your square roots. If I multiply 2 times 1, 2 times 1 is 2. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to try and take the square root of 36. Anybody know what the square root of 36 is? 6. So I'm going to replace that with a 6. Everything else is still the same. So the square root of 36 was 6. I'm starting to run out of room, so I'm going to bring the work back up here to the top. And I have x is equal to negative 2 plus and minus 6 all over 2. Now we are working with quadratic, so we should have 2 answers. So we're going to split this up so that we can find what those 2 answers are. We're going to have one that says negative 2 plus 6 divided by 2. And we're going to have another equation that says x equals negative 2 minus 6 divided by 2. So one has the plus, the other has the minus. Alright, so we'll do the first one. Negative 2 plus 6. Negative 2 plus 6, that's positive 4. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. So there's one answer. One of the answers is a 2. We'll come over here and do the same, except now we're going to subtract. Negative 2 minus 6. Negative 2 minus 6 is negative 8. And a negative 8 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 4. So the other answer is negative 4. So my 2 roots, or my 2 solutions, would be 2 and negative 4. Now, on today's assignment, most of yours are going to be in that form. Most of your answers are going to look just like that. What I want you to do is I want you to go to your assignment, and I want you to circle number 2, number 4, number 6, 10, and 12. That was 2, 4, 6, 10, and 12. All of those that you just circled will be worked out this exact same way. They're all pretty much like this one here. Okay? But there are going to be some others that are a little bit different, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. The next one I'm going to work out with you is going to be number 7. So let's take a look at number 7 next. For number 7, we have 8n squared minus 4n equals 18. Number 7. First thing I'm going to do is get this thing equal to 0. And to do that, I'm simply going to subtract the 18. So my new equation becomes 8n squared minus 4n minus 18. Got to have it equal to 0 first before you can start using your quadratic formula. All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and use that quadratic formula or write it down. So it's negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now I just write it down each and every time just so that you can see the formula itself. You can write it down once or you can write it down every single time. I'll leave that up to you. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to replace each of those letters, each of those variables, with some numbers. I'm going to start off with a negative sign. So this is part of the formula. The letter B. What are we going to replace the letter B with? What kind of 4? Negative 4. Now here's the thing, guys. We got a negative sign already. And now we have a negative 4. So that negative and that negative 4 now make it a positive 4. So I'm just going to write it as a positive 4, just so there's not so many negative signs there. All right, now I'm inside the square roots, inside the radical. I'm going to replace the b with a negative 4. I'm going to replace the a with an 8. And I'm going to replace the c with a negative 18. And right below that, I've got 2 times a. The a for us is an 8. So there it is with all the numbers plugged in. All right, so now what I'm going to do is go to my calculator, and I'm going to do that piece that's underneath the radical, underneath that square root. We're going to find that discriminant. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times 8 times negative 18. Let's see what we end up with there. What are we getting for that one? By the way, don't forget to use parentheses around your negative 4. Otherwise, you could end up with the wrong answer. 592. All right, so we get a 592. And, of course, if we multiply 2 times 8, 2 times 8 is 16. Now, here's what's going to make this one a little bit different from that first example. If I go to my calculator and try and take the square root of 592, what happens when you try and take the square root of 592? It's a decimal, and we're not going to use those decimals. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to come over here and we're going to simplify that square root of 592. Think of it kind of like a fraction. You want to reduce it. We want to simplify this over here. So this is some scratch work. You don't have to write this. I'm just showing you what I'm doing out to the side here. So 592. What I want to do is I want to see if I can come up with some numbers that I can multiply together to get 592. And here's the numbers that I came up with. 16 and I believe it was 37. Let's double check that. Somebody multiply 16 times 37. I think that's 592, right? All right, so the question is, why did I choose these 2 numbers? Well, here's why I chose those 2 numbers. Notice that of these 2 numbers, one of them I can take the square root of. One of them is a perfect square. Can y'all tell which one is the perfect square? 16. The square root of 16 becomes a 4. So I'm replacing that with a 4. Of course, if I try and take the square root of 37, I'm back to that decimal again, and I don't want that. So I'm going to leave it the square root of 37. So here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm getting at. That square root of 592, I'm going to replace that with a 4 square root of 37. All the other stuff is still the same. So what I've done is I've simplified the square root of 592. So the question is, am I done? No, not quite. Almost, but not quite. There's still one last thing I'm going to do here. And I'm running out of room, so I'll bring it back up here. If you look closely, look at these numbers here. I got a 4, I got a 4, and I've got a 16. What goes into 4, 4, and 16 evenly? 4, 4. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to reduce it, basically what I'm doing. Anybody know how many times 4 will go into a 4? 1. So I'm going to replace that first 4 with a 1. How many times will 4 go into that 4? Once. So let's replace that with a 1 as well. And the denominator, 16. How many times will 4 go into 16? 4 times. So all I've done is basically divided everything by 4 so that I could reduce or simplify this. At this point, there's no more simplifying I can do. So there it is. This is what I'm calling my answer. We got 1 plus the square root of 37 over 4. But we also have 1 minus the square root of 37 over 4. So there are still 2 answers. Now, luckily for you guys, you're not going to have too many of these on today's assignment. Matter of fact, the only ones that are like that are going to be number 14 and number 16. So you might want to put a star or something by that. 14 and number 16, you're going to get some answers that look kind of like this one here. But I want to be on the safe side. I'm going to give you one more example, kind of like this one here, just so that you can have another one to look at. And that's going to be number, I think it's number 13. So let's go to number 13. And let's look at that one. We're going to get another answer that looks just like that last example that we did. All right, so number 13, I'm going to start off by getting this thing equal to 0 first. So all I've done is subtract the 6x. There it is. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and write down my quadratic formula. That's x equals negative b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. Divide that by 2a. That's the formula that we're using. All right, so let me go ahead and replace all the letters with some numbers here. I've got a negative to start off with. And now I've got to replace b with a negative 6. Well, instead of writing 2 negatives, I'm simply going to write that as a positive 6. Because a negative times a negative make it a positive. All right, I'm underneath the radical there. B, let's replace that with a negative 6. Let's replace the a with a 9. And I'm going to replace the c with a negative 11. Down at the bottom, we got 2 times a. A for us is the 9. So there it is with everything plugged in. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and find the discriminant. I want to find that piece that's underneath the square roots. So you're going to go to your calculator and you're going to enter negative 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 11. Just make sure you're using parentheses around your negative 6. All right, what do we get? What's that? 432. So we're getting 432. And if I multiply 2 times 9, 2 times 9 is 18. Now remember, I said this is just like the one we got through doing. If you go to your calculator right now and try and take the square root of 432, you're going to end up with a decimal, and that's not what we want. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to come over here and we're going to see if we can break this apart. Let's see if we can simplify it. Now here's the suggestion. We're not always going to know off the top of our head what 2 numbers we can multiply together to get 432. So here's what I recommend. Take 432 and divide it by 2. Everybody go to your calculators and divide by 2. And you get 216. Can you take the square root of 216 without getting a decimal? No. No. So let's not use those numbers. Let's try divide by 3 then. Let's do 432 divided by 3. And now you get 144. Can you take the square root of 144 without getting a decimal? Yeah, so let's use those 2 numbers. I'm going to write it so that you can see. So as we just said, 144 times 3 gives us the 432. And the reason I stopped at these numbers is because we can take the square root of 144. The square root of 144 now becomes 12. And we're going to leave the square root of 3 alone. So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying we're going to come over here and we're going to replace the square root of 432 with a 12 square root of 3. That's what I'm trying to say. We're almost there. Almost there. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and see if I can reduce this. So I'm looking at the 6, I'm looking at the 12, and I'm looking at the 18. I'm looking at those 3 numbers. Is there anything that'll go into those 3 numbers? 6. So what we're going to do is divide everything by 6. 6 divided by 6 is a 1. 12 divided by 6 is a 2. And the 18 divided by 6, that's 3. And at this point, that's as much simplifying I can do. So that right there is going to be my answer. So again, number 14 and number 16 will work out just like this one here. All right, we got one more example that we're going to look at. And that's going to be number, let's see, where is it at? Number 9. So I'm going to go back to number 9, and that'll be the last one that we look at together. All right, so as you can see on number 9, the first thing we're going to do is get it equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract the x. So now I have the equation 10x squared minus x plus 9 equals 0. It's got to be in that standard form. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my formula. Squared minus 4ac, divide that by 2a. Go ahead and start plugging in the numbers. I got a negative b, and the b for us is a negative 1. So that negative and that negative are going to make it a positive 1 for me. B, we're going to replace that with a negative 1. For A, we're going to use the 10. And for C, we'll use the 9. And right below that, we got 2 times A. A for us is the 10. All right, now we're going to go to the calculator. And we're going to find the discriminant. We're going to find that piece that's underneath the square root. So negative 1 squared minus 4 times 10 times 9. And what do we get? Negative 359. And all of that gets divided by 2 times 10. 2 times 10 is 1. All right, so here's a new problem that we run into. We haven't run into this problem yet. What's going to happen if you try and take the square root of a negative 359? You're going to get an error, and that's because your calculator won't take the square root of negative numbers. So we talked about this last week, and I'm going to do this. This is my little scratch work out to the side. I'm going to break this up as the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 359. And the reason I'm doing that is because I told you the other day what the square root of negative 1 was. The square root of negative 1 is I. So I'm going to replace that with an I. And then I could go over there and try and reduce that or simplify the 359, but in this case, it won't. So I'm going to leave it square root of 359. I can't break that apart. It won't simplify any more than it is. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to rewrite this as I square root of 359 all over 20. And if you look there, I got a 1, an I, and a 20. Is there anything that goes into a 1, I, and a 20 evenly? No. So that pretty much means that we are done. All right, so we end up with a 1 plus and minus I square root of 359, and that's all over 20. I can't simplify it any more than it already is. So that right there is going to be my answer. So you're only going to have one of those, and that's going to be on number 8. So number 8, you should end up with an answer that looks kind of like this one right here. All right, so you're going to go back and do the even numbers, just the even numbers. Once you get it done, go ahead and turn it in for me.